Well, greetings, Series 7 test takers. This is the Series 7 guru coming to you from my studio in fabulous Las Vegas. Looks like people are getting back to work on their study effort, getting a lot of requests to help out with some questions. First comment I would make, the person who requested this said, well, you said, Dean, not to worry too much about break even and max gain and max loss in this. And that's true. When I'm making comments, I'm always making comments about the actual exam, not practice questions. But that being said, if you are doing the practice questions, you're going to encounter them and should be prepared. The first biggest thing you got to remember is when you have a stock position that dominates. And so the first thing we want to recognize here as a test taker is that we're short the stock. Let me get a bigger font for that. And so when you sell short stock, remember you're bearish. So, that's what's going to dominate this position. And it's a stock position. So don't let the option tail wag the stock dog. And so what I always suggest is making a T. If you get good at contract specifications and you can track money, then you don't have to memorize anything. So, whatever your process is. My process is to get a T. As my students are, fond of saying, fire up the T, fire up the T. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, this be a good example of when to fire up the T? I said, there's no situation in which firing up the T is not a good idea. And I like to use dollars out, dollars in. Some people like to use, instead of dollars out, for example, they like to use debit, or they like to use minus. And as I said, I like to use dollars out versus dollars in. Well, whatever floats your boat. As long as you can track money, you're in pretty good shape. And so, it's kind of like learning a foreign language. They say when you dream the foreign language, that's when you know it. And so hopefully it sounds less and less of foreign language rather than more and more. So again, I like to use dollars in. Some people like to use a credit. Some people like to use plus. Again, whatever floats your boat. Now, you should know that when you sell short, you're doing an opening sale. You're doing an opening sale. And so this is called the setup. So what we want to be able to do is do a setup. And so that's going to be 72 in when I sell short the stock. Again, I suggest you do things on a per share basis. A per share basis. Now, the other thing you might want to do is you might want to kind of just make an arrow to remind yourself that if you did an opening sale, the offset, let me get a different color, is going to be a closing purchase. And again, you might want to remind yourself that when you sell short, as a bear, you want the stock to go down, and the stock can go down to zero. You should know that if you don't do anything besides this, if you don't do any risk mitigation, you're going to have unlimited risk. And so here, I'm hoping that you can look at this pretty quickly. Let's just put this under here. And you understand contract specifications. What I mean by that is, that's a choice or right to buy the stock at the strike price. And by the way, that would be a good thing to be able to do, right? To put in a ceiling. Options are all about floors and ceilings, not testable. The conversation's not testable. What's testable is, at the end of the day, can you tell me what's going on here? But, the more you do understand it, the better you're going to be prepared in terms of solving questions. So I like to think that a 70 here is a ceiling, which is a pretty smart thing to have when you think about it, right? Because, this is protection. Protection costs money. So whenever you got protection, it's going to cost you some money. So let's put that in there. To be able to buy back the borrowed stock at a set price being 70, at any time between now and June at $70 a share, we paid $5. And so that's our initial setup. And again, maybe you want to just remind yourself that if you did an opening purchase, the offset would be a closing sale. Okay, so we've got our setup. Now, remember, on the exam, they're going to offer you some break-evens. And break-evens is ultimately the number that if you plug it in, assuming you did your setup right, would make the columns balance, right? So if I'm shopping my answer set, I need something to make the columns balance. So let's say they offer me, let's just put it up here so we can put it next to her. let's say that choice B, I haven't looked at the answer he said yet, so I don't know what it is, but let's assume choice B when we do the reveal is 68. And I said, well, if I plug 68 in there, that doesn't seem to break even. That means it would be 73 out and 72 in. So that doesn't work. Let's say choice C, they offer me as a potential break even is 67. I go, okay, well, if I plug 67 in there, indeed, that would be the break even. So 67 is the break even. What we, you can think of it, what we brought in for the stock. Let's put that in green. We brought in 72 and we paid out for the protection 5. And so we are net out of pocket. We are net out of pocket 67. Right? So I'm just showing you what that math looks like in terms of the break even. Let me put that there. Boom. So remember, that was one of our questions. So we haven't done the reveal yet. But we know that we're looking for a break even of 67. This is really a tough one. So I understand what you say. Well, you didn't tell me I'd have to worry about. Look at this hellacious question. So, all right. So we've got our break even of 67. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit because we're going to move on now. It says the maximum gain. Well, what do I want to have happen? What do I want to have happen? What I want to have happen is I want the stock to go to 0. I mean, I want it to go from the ceiling all the way to 0. That would be ideal. One's good, but 0's better. So this stock is worthless, 0. Then I would net out the columns. You can either net out the columns or you can think, well, break even to 0. It's 67 points, right? So you can either, again, net out your T, or you can memorize break even to 0, which I think is kind of a mental mess personally. But the other thing we said you could do is you could take your T and just simply net, assume you understand. It comes with practice, drilling, rehearsing. I just linked a whole lecture on this. But now we just, net the columns and say, okay, I get good news. Again, I recommend you do this per share because, if not, you're going to have all kinds of zeros floating around. So at the end, then I would remind myself, how many contracts are we discussing? And so it looks like the best case scenario here is when the stock goes to 0, I'm going to make $67 per share. And we're talking about 100 shares. So 6,700 is giving me my max gain. And let's put that in green. Okay, so and then it says, so we got our break even. Let's put our break even over here. We got a break even of 67. I recommend, again, this is just a recommendation, but you might want to put an arrow next to your break even just to remind yourself where you want it in relationship to that. As we said, this is bearish. And the reason that's helpful is because they give us a stock. It'll make it easier for us to close out. Now, being the smart bears that we are, we weren't dumb bears here. We could have been a dumb bear, but we were not a dumb bear. Anytime we want, we can close this position out by exercising our call contract. And that's our ceiling, right? So anytime we want, we can close this out by exercising, because remember, we can exercise anytime. And if FAB comes up with the cure for cancer or something and get bought out by Merck or Pfizer for $1 gazillion, I'm going to exercise my call contract. I'm going to exercise my choice to buy back the borrowed stock at the strike price. So again, if you can track the money, that's easier. You could either memorize it's the break even to the strike, right? Which I think is kind of a mental mess, but you could say, okay, well, 67 and the floor is 70, right? I can put my 67 here if I want. That remembers our break even to that 70. So you can memorize. I always say, if you've been following me on the channel is the best free supplement to your paid study materials. But if you've been following me on the channel, I always say, if you go down the memory road, the amount of things you're going to have to memorize is going to continue to compound, right? So our max loss here is going to be the break even, the strike. Now I'd be real careful when you net things. I don't typically, in terms of my mechanics, net this with it by doing this, because I don't like to introduce numbers that are me doing addition or subtraction. But you could net this and say, okay, well, 72. I would just look at my T, but you could do it any way you want. What I'm saying is you could either close out the T by subtotaling that, or you could just look at it, so. And that looks like my worst case scenario. So our maximum loss is going to be $300. Now, again, when you're doing it per share, which again, I recommend you do, then when you're all done, you just got to check and see how many shares or how many contracts you're looking at. So we're only looking at here 100 shares with one contract. Okay, so let's just do real quick a review. Boom, 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 boom. Move all the way back. So here was the question. This is Kaplan QID 1283064. If you want to buy a Kaplan Q Bank as a paid supplement, I highly recommend it with my Guru 10 discount code. At checkout, it's about $60. That's the commercial that allows us to get free look at Kaplan products. Okay, so we sold short 100 shares. That dominates. That's bearish. So we're going to make our T and do our initial setup. We're bringing in 72 for the short stock position. We're paying out for the protection 5 points. So we are net out of pocket 67. And that is our break even. It's either going to be always net, meaning you net the numbers, or you add, depending on buy or buy sell. If it's a buy sell or sell buy here, you net. So that's our break even. That was part of the questions that we were asked here. Our maximum gain or loss, we could do it either way. Our maximum gain is when the stock goes to zero. If the stock goes to zero, we brought in 67. We pay out nothing, so we make 67, or we could close out the T and say we brought in 72, paid out 5. That's another way of illustrating 6,700 is our maximum gain. Our maximum loss is incurred when we exercise our call. And if we exercise our call, we buy the borrowed stock, buy back the borrowed stock, give it back to the person we borrowed it from. And we do so at 70. And so 67 to 70, break even to the strike. You can either memorize break even to the strike, or you can just get your T. So you could say break even to strike, XP means strike. That's 67 to 70, or you could just, again, net your T. We're out 75. Worst case, we brought in 72. So you can do it either way you want to do it in terms of that. All right, so let's now see what is available to us as an answer set. And as an answer set, there we go. Maximum gain is 6,700. Maximum loss is 300. Break even is 67. Hope you found that helpful. And I would tell you, when I'm backstage using the Q Bank like this, every time I'm showing you the reveal, it's going to be choice A because of how the Q Bank works. So this may not have been your choice A. It may have been your choice B or C or whatever, but that's the right answer. I had a guy he says, I follow you on the channel every time. The answer's A. And I said, well, no, that's just because we're using backstage. Okay, so Merry Christmas. Remember, inch by inch, Series 7 is a cinch. Yard by yard, Series 7 is hard. Keep working. And again, you can send me any explication request that you have like this one. Bye-bye.